it's said that King George III heard that George Washington was thinking about willingly stepping out of power. And he said that if he does it, if George Washington gives up power, he will be the greatest man in the world. Joe Biden's age has become increasingly a topic of concern for voters. Many people are worried about his mental competency moving forward, and it's been showing for the last several years, but it seems to be declining. Now, I'll just give you kind of a look into my life. I watched my maternal grandmother pass away with severe dementia and Alzheimer's. So it's hard for some of this to be funny to me. I also think that most people aren't laughing at Joe Biden, the man, completely miss up who world leaders are or where countries are, or not really know exactly. Seems like he knows where he is all of the time. I think it's actually the situation that is comical. The idea that we would have someone as the most powerful individual probably on planet Earth, that person would be making these kinds of mistakes is so ludicrous that it becomes almost laughable. At the same time, you have people who are in his administration, Homeland Security Director Alexander Mayorkas, who just went on to a news cast and said that the hardest part of meeting with Joe Biden is how mentally sharp he is. Like, you got to really come with your stuff. And so that's someone in his administration, and you would expect them to give some props and to maybe help bolster his credentials, because we are in an election year. And at this point, Joe Biden is the candidate on the left, and Donald Trump is the nominee on the right. And both of these guys are well advanced in years. Biden is in his 80s. President Trump, were he to win, would also be in his 80s by the end of this term. And so what is going on here? And is Joe Biden mentally competent? Is he slipping into senility? Not only has he had these blunders in press conferences, but probably most discouraging for the Biden camp is the report that was released by the Department of Justice. Now, this report is about Biden's mishandling of classified information. You can read the report for yourself. They make it very clear that he did, in fact, mishandle significant classified information in a way that could be prosecuted. However, they're not going to prosecute him because they don't think that a jury would find him liable for this, specifically because he has such a bad memory. Let's look at this from AP News. Special counsel alleged Biden couldn't recall personal milestones. His response: "My memory is fine." It says the longstanding concerns about President Joe Biden's age and memory intensified on Thursday after the release of a special counsel's report investigating his possession of classified documents. The report described the 81-year-old Democrat's memory as hazy, fuzzy, faulty, poor, and having significant limitations. It's noted that Biden could not recall defining milestones in his own life, such as when his son Beau died or when he served as vice president. Obviously, that's quite concerning, right? "My memory is fine," Biden responded Thursday night from the White House, where he grew visibly angry as he denied forgetting when his son died. Beau Biden died of brain cancer in 2015 at the age of 46. While Biden will not face charges for mishandling classified documents, the report's assertions about his memory could undermine Biden's message to voters that he can manage the government and safeguard the country. Voters are already going into this year's election with severe misgivings about Biden's age, having scrutinized his gaffes, his coughing, his slow walking, and even a tumble off of his bicycle. Yet, even as Biden defended himself, he committed another gaffe while discussing the Israel-Hamas war and mistakenly referred to Egypt's leader as the president of Mexico. What happened, if you didn't see it, is Biden called a press conference specifically to comment on the DOJ's charge that he has a failing memory. And as he's trying to fight that charge, he makes another gaffe and refers to the president of Egypt as the president of Mexico. Here's what's really happening. It's actually kind of interesting. Biden is in a catch-22. He is not going to be prosecuted. This is what his Department of Justice says. They're not going to prosecute him because of his senility. But he has to fight that charge in order to encourage voters that he can be president for another term. So in order to convince the voters that he can actually stand for another term, he basically has to say to the Department of Justice, hey, the one reason you're not prosecuting me isn't real. In other words, you should prosecute me. Man, I'm as sharp as a tack. My Homeland Security guy can't even keep up with me in meetings. My aides can't even keep up with what's going on. I know my facts and figures all the time. Sure, I misspeak sometimes. Who doesn't? I have a hard job, but I am mentally competent. Well, that takes away the Department of Justice their only excuse for not prosecuting him. So either he's growing senile and doesn't need to get prosecuted, but a lot of voters are going to be discouraged, or he is sharp as a tack or somewhere close, and he does need to be prosecuted, and that will probably hurt his odds with the voters as well. He really finds himself in a catch-22. And I want to make this very clear. This is not just a Joe Biden problem. This is like a systemic problem inside of politics. And when you look at who is actually making up the executive branch, who makes up our the majority of our senators, especially our most powerful senators, the Congress tends to tilt a little younger, but not always. We have some significantly aged people in the House of Representatives as well. And so the real question is, why won't aging leaders step aside? Why are people being wheeled in looking like death to take votes? Senator Feinstein, who did pass away, but someone should have pulled her out of there long before that. Why won't they? And there's probably unique aspects to every person, but absolute power just corrupts, absolutely. And the desire for power and the desire for position is something that permeates our culture. The desire for power and the desire for position. And this is not a new issue. All the way back when Jesus was on earth, he had these disciples and they were seeing him do all these incredible signs and wonders. And they knew that he was going to be the king of all of heaven someday. Something really interesting happened in Matthew chapter 20. Let's take a look together. It says, then the mother of Zebedee's sons approached him with her sons. She knelt down to ask Jesus for something. What do you want? He asked. Promise, she said to him, that these two sons of mine may sit, one on your right and the other on your left in your kingdom. In other words, what do they want? They want position and they want power. Jesus answered, you don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink? And we are able, they said. He told them, you will indeed drink my cup, but to sit at my right and left is not mine to give. Instead, it is for those who have been prepared by my Father. And when the disciples heard this, they became indignant with the two brothers because they're trying to jump the line. They want the position and power. Jesus called them over and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles, those who don't believe in God, lord their power over them, and those in high positions act as tyrants over them. It must not be like that among you. On the contrary, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. We see this even at the beginning of our own country, that there was this idea that once I, as a leader, got up in age, I kind of stepped out of the primary leadership role and I found people under me to mentor and to raise up. However, this deep desire for position and power, as short-sighted as it is, has gripped our society. And it is primarily what is keeping aged leaders in place far past their prime and potentially far past their ability to even function in the roles that they have been elected to or assigned to. And we see a stark contrast with the very first president of the United States. George Washington was, basically ushered in to the presidency. And it was decades before, I believe, the 26th Amendment, 26th Amendment, which limited the president to 2 terms. In other words, George Washington could have just become the king of America. And after 2 terms, George Washington stepped aside. We have the transcript of his farewell speech, and I want to look just a few paragraphs down. He says this, not unconscious in the outset of the inferiority of my qualifications, experience in my own eyes, perhaps still more in the eyes of others, has strengthened the motives to diffidence of myself. And every day, the increasing weight of years, in other words, how old I'm getting, Every day, the increasing weight of years admonishes me more and more that the shade of retirement is as necessary to me as it will be welcome. Satisfied that, if any circumstances have given peculiar value to my services, they were temporary. I have the consolation to believe that while choice and prudence invite me to quit the political scene, patriotism does not forbid it. And so what he is saying, he's speaking in very eloquent language of the 18th and 19th century. This speech was actually written by Alexander Hamilton, who wrote a lot of George Washington's speeches for him. But the heart of it came from George Washington. He's going, look, I served somewhat reluctantly. Wouldn't that be incredible? Almost reluctant leaders who everyone wants to put in power, but they're not there just seeking position and power. They're seeking the betterment of the people around them. And after a couple of years, he steps aside and he lays down his power in this just burgeoning country that's going to ultimately become the greatest power on earth, at least for the time being. It's said that King George III heard that George Washington was thinking about willingly stepping out of power. And he said that if he does it, if George Washington gives up power, he will be the greatest man in the world. King George is like, I inherited my throne and nobody else is going to get it. One of my kids is going to get it. If George Washington, who, by the way, just led the Revolutionary Army to defeat England and now sits at the throne of power, is the president, could be the king who was defeated says, man, if he gives this up, he will be the greatest man in the world. This is what Jesus was telling his disciples, that the way up is down, that the way to power is humility, that the way to status is service. And even the Son of Man, Jesus himself, God in human flesh, did not come to be served, but to serve others and ultimately to give his life away to make others' life better. True power is not in hanging on to your position, but in doing whatever is in the best interest of those that you serve. We're a very, very long way away from that ideal in our country, but maybe we could be the generation who brings it back. If you enjoyed this clip, make sure you check out the full podcast and subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with all new content. You can also support the channel at patreon.com/Clayton Tyner. Link is in the description below.